everyone in your network should also see this, or at least get a notification to say, "Oh, Charles has gone live, Arian's gone live," and stuff like that. So, should all be good. Okay, cool. We should be live, everybody. Welcome everybody to Brainfood Live on Air, bringing it to you every Friday, no fail. It is episode 294. How can you believe it? We're nearly up to 300 episodes of this. Like, that's like 6 years worth of constant live streaming every week. Crazy commitment. But thank you, everyone, for joining us and being part of this party. Really great to have you. I know it's a bit of an unusual time for Brainfood Live, but we wanted to make sure that we had kind of a good exposure to the US market today. So, early start for the folks in PT. Hopefully, it's optimal for everyone in ET. And I do believe people in UK and Europe should be getting this as well. So let's do some sound checks first of all to make sure everything can hear us all right. Can you hear and see us in Crowdcast? Just let us know in the comments there whether the audio and visual is fine. You should see me, myself, Charles Ma, and Arian Moon on screen. Just checking on LinkedIn. We should also be live streaming this on multiple places there. Let me know if you can hear and see me on LinkedIn, folks. GoodTime company page. If you're watching it on that, let us know in the comments whether you can hear and see us. And I do believe people like Rob Walker, as ever, is broadcasting with us. So thank you, Rob. We've got people from, and anybody who's sort of friends with Charles and Arian, I think they're broadcasting on their LinkedIns as well. Let us know on their respective profiles whether you can hear and see us okay. Thank you, Hannah. Audio video look great. I like it. Michael, thank you for confirming. We should be all good in this case. So let's get on with the show. Folks, we've been going on sort of I don't know whether you've detected it, but there's been a little bit of a mini theme where I've been speaking to companies that have invested in doing research and then getting the people, typically the founders, onto the screen to talk us through their insights. So we've done a bunch of these already. They've turned out to be really popular shows. And I think it just is testament to the amount of hunger the market has for, the kind of benchmarking data that only vendors can really provide. I think everyone wants to be data driven, quote unquote, but the only data we have access to is our own data. So we don't know what a good number is, and we don't know what a bad number is. We need sort of research from companies that have been able to aggregate other people, other businesses in, so that everyone's got a bench. So great to see GoodTime be one of those businesses. And in fact, you're not casuals at this. This is like, is it your fourth survey in a row? I think that's 4 years you've done it, isn't it, guys? Actually, no, before we get on, let's just introduce the people we've got on screen. Sorry, that's so rude. Let's go with you first, Arian. Great to see you. Why don't you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Yeah, so I'm Arian, one of the co-founders and CEO of GoodTime. GoodTime is the orchestration layer that really handles all the actions that has to happen between, when the candidate goes from one stage to another. We automatically schedule interviews, we prep candidates, prep interviewers, we surface interesting interview insights, and so on. And really elevate experience for all stakeholders. Based in Las Vegas, I don't know if there's any Las Vegans here today, but yeah, so excited to be here, huh? And I'll pass
Yeah,
to Charles.
great to have you on the show as always, Arian. And we have Charles Ma here as well. Charles, wonderful to see you. Can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Great. Well, thanks, Hung. I'm Charles Ma. I'm the Chief Customer and Operations Officer here at GoodTime. I've been with the company for about a year. I also come from the recruiting space, formerly leading recruiting at companies like SAP and Workday. It's a really fun area as we think about AI-driven automation. I work closely with Arian around our strategy, but also our delivery of services and really trying to help customers fulfill that journey of orchestrating all the various different pieces of noise that comes from the hiring journey today, which has evolved so much over the last couple of years. So really excited here to chat through some of the insights and also what it means for the industry.
Fantastic and great. I've just shared the LinkedIn of both Arian and Charles into the chat stream there, folks. So do make sure you connect and follow these two. Always good to use the excuse of a webinar to make sure you connect with folks that say and do interesting things in the market. Okay, let's just put some context to this. Arian, let's go to you first. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of this research? What is it? Like, what do you sort of aim to achieve? And just a bit of context as to who was surveyed and what kind of data we've got before we dive into the report itself.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've been doing research and annual reports for the last 4 years in a row, I believe. We generally research about 500 heads of talent, CHROs, and basically people leaders in the industry, generally mid to large enterprise custom companies. And what we are aiming to do is to really detect the trends that are going on in the TA market. We work with a lot of customers, small and large, and they typically ask us, hey, do you have some data that I can use? Am I doing well? Can I benchmark against how the market is doing? Because everything, how well we are doing is generally, definitely relative. So if the market is really tough, compared to that, am I doing well? Are there any improvement areas that I can actually work on, type of thing? So that was the impetus of us doing the research ourselves and providing the data to our customers. And now we make that available for general public.
Yeah, absolutely great stuff to do. And it's exactly this. We need the information of what's happening outside the wider market for our own sort of sense of purpose, but also to have those internal discussions. Because without that, we're just jawing away. We need the evidence. So fantastic to do it. I'm going to we've got some slides to show folks. So what we're going to do is kind of have a look at some of this. Let's say go slides. Well, I can actually upload a PDF here. Should I do that? Let's try this. This is outside of what Hannah suggested, so forgive us, Hannah, if this is a bit high risk. But I've just seen a feature here which suggests I can do this. So let's go for it. Importing a bunch of PDFs, that should be easy enough to do. Let's see if it's okay. But Charles, interesting to kind of go from your perspective here as well, because you're one of these people that does have a sort of a that kind of dual approach. Like you've come from the side of a TA person, so you are formerly one of the operators, the people doing this type of work. Can you give us your perspective with regards to how you've seen some of the early bits of this research? Why do you think research like this is important?
Yeah, I think the research is important in that it really unlocks the questions I think a lot of talent acquisition leaders, recruiters, and operations professionals are thinking about. I mean, if you think about Hung, we always go through in the staffing world of thinking, why are things so hard to get hires done? Sometimes it's about sourcing, sometimes it's about scarcity of talent. But I think one thing that I found this insights report really helpful for me, and I've tracked it for the last couple of years, is the whole notion of the operational aspects of how hard it is, right? And so if you think about 2 years ago, it was a different problem. People were talking about not enough candidates. We need more technologies to drive more candidates to postings. We see it on like LinkedIn or whatever you post. You get like now hundreds, if not thousands of candidates because the market has changed in terms of the candidate dynamic. Now, the problem I look at this report is it's really helpful for me, but also helpful for industries to think about uniquely to themselves of what are some of the areas of improvement that can be taken in. So you look at the fine thing where, in the marketing industry, it's not the whole general story. It's those fine points about where is the SEO working out or where the output's working out or not. And I think this gives some indicators to around parts of the orchestration process where you think about, is it interviewing? Is it the assessment? Is there something in the middle? And I think that's what's really great is really honing down so you can actually really diagnose and think about the right solution to solve it.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the strong elements of this research is the kind of granularity of it. It dives into some really recruitment operations type of level, which helps us get some concepts of where we need to be. Folks, I've just flashed up the QR code on there. I haven't actually tested this, but someone give it a go and see whether you can download the report. It's free to access. Well worth you getting a hold of it. Everyone who's watching it on Crowdcast, you should have already received an email from me with the link on this, but I'm flashing this up on screen for the folks who are watching this on LinkedIn, who you would not have received any email from me, but this is your opportunity to simply download this this report. So go ahead and give it a shot. If it doesn't work, of course, let me know, and we'll find a way to get the report out over to you. Okay, let's crack through some of the highlights of this. QR code works. Rob, thank you so much. We need to give you a T-shirt or something. He's like Mr. Mr. Customer Support, customer testing, everything. Okay, let's get cracking through. Aaron, we actually have a question in LinkedIn. I've just noticed a quick one where they've asked the question. Okay, who are these 500 people? I think there's some highlights on the paragraph there as to what they are. But can you give us a quick overview? Things like country, where they're from, are they US based only? And is it particularly these 5 sectors, or were there other sort of other sectors involved here as well?
Yeah, definitely. I believe the research, the audience was in North America as well as Europe. And we focused on these 5 sectors. So that we can really provide more kind of pointed results and data instead of just so wide that it kind of, the result is not super relevant for everyone. So yes, we did focus on these 5 sectors.
Yeah, perfect. So just for people who might, not be able to see the report itself, or not watching this on screen right now and listening to audio, these 5 sectors are tech, financial services, retail, manufacturing, and healthcare. Okay, cool. Let's fly through this. It's only about 10 slides, folks, so don't worry about it. First one, state of hiring across sectors. Let's have a look at some of this. I love this question, like the percentage of hiring goals attained. So this is one of the, golden questions within this survey. You simply ask these TA leaders, okay, did you attain your hiring goals? Yes or no? And you can just measure how many people said, yes, we did, and measure how many people who said they didn't. Now, because this survey's been going for 4 years consistently, it means that we have a time series and we can assess where we're at. So let's have a look at the first chart on the top there. Charles, maybe you can give us some insight here. Percentage of hiring goals attained. I'm looking at this saying, look, 47.9% have said they've attained it, which is obviously less than 50%. So majority of heads of TA basically failed to achieve their target. Now you can argue to all excessive targets, etc., but the point is they didn't attain their goals. But what's more interesting is that it seems to have kind of collapsed from a high of 51.3% all the way down to 47.9% from 2023. What's your theory as to why that is, Charles?
Yeah, I think my theory, at least when I look at this, is that the dynamics have changed a lot between the 2022 to 2024 period. You saw an improvement in 2023 because I think also you saw a change of kind of, number one, less jobs. We saw kind of this turnaround where there's more hiring happening back today, but also there's a ton more candidates. So efficiency is the key thing I think a lot of talent leaders are concerned about. So if you think about the job that was posted in 2023, you had at the start of 2023 and 2022, there were less candidates. You were a little bit more able to supply your services, such as how many recruiters and capacity you have to tackle what you had in front of you. To also 2023, you start to see this drop towards 2024 when suddenly hiring demand has gone up again. And with hiring demand up, more candidates, it kind of have this clash of 2 really big forces. And so I think one of the key things, you look at the second box, there's the time to hire. That's also re-increased in a sense that it dropped at first. 2023 was one of those moments where recruiting was definitely had that capacity. Now capacity's also been reduced. You're looking at the fact is you need more level of support when it comes to better efficiency of process, how candidates get more timely service, but doing it at scale. And so my thinking here is I think hitting those hiring goals are a challenge when you have less recruiters potentially, more demands, and also more demands of recruiters. So, or sorry, more demands of candidates. So you're seeing this clash of everything coming to the center. And so it's definitely more chaotic, which is making 2024 harder to see the light. And I think 2025 is going to see similar challenges ahead.
Yeah, I mean it's super interesting. It's a really good sort of coverage of at least two or three of those big trends, Charles. So I guess none of us would have thought that hey, having would get so many candidates that would be a problem, but it has turned out to be the case. Where you publish a job, you know, I'm hearing from some of my contacts that they're frightened to do so now. Like they know that publishing a job will just simply create a surge of applications that they can't handle, and they've almost got the disable the hovering over the disable the job, like sleep the job, you know, just because they know they have to take it down in 24 hours, otherwise they end up getting too many candidates. But of course the obligation to then respond to those candidates follow up, rightly so, you know, they want to know what's happened to the application and so on. There's a huge queue, and you don't have the resourcing. Remember, TA teams have been kind of significantly reduced over the last 18, 24 months or so. So we've got less recruiters dealing with significantly more candidates. And that's caused hiring goals not to be attained. Bottom line, extended a sort of a sort of time to hires. We can't process the candidates. Huge crisis. Arian, you're nodding your head with this. Do you have another theory or another kind of observation as to why you think the time to hire has increased beyond the stuff that Charles has mentioned?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely, TA team is much smaller compared to 2023, 2024. You know, things were definitely on the uptick, so hiring goal has risen. Also, another thing I believe is because, you know, say compared to 2021 and even 2022, when, you know, the companies were giving you unlimited budget to hire as many people as you want. Now, I think the headcount that you are given in your budget to hire has shrunk in size also. So I think we actually have another slide about this, but quality of hire is so much more important now. So everyone's thinking, okay, instead of 10 people, I only get to hire 5 people. Those 5 people must be superstars. So I think the hiring bar for hiring managers have gone up significantly also. So kind of, I think the mindset that everyone has is, can I wait and see a few more people? What if there's someone that's better that will come around if I just, you know, interview a few more people? So I think that also contributes to time to hire becoming longer and longer.
Yeah, so basically abundance mindset, folks. I hate to compare recruiting to Tinder, but I think it's similar in this respect, because of this sense there's always just another option. You know, you're never gonna go on a date. It's like, you know, just keep swiping. And I think, I mean, I might be unfair with hiring managers, folks. You let me know in the comments. I mean, are you getting a sense that hiring managers are not sort of particularly urgent with the candidates you're presenting, because they feel that actually, you know, just hang on another 5 days, is going to be another 3 candidates in the pipe that may be as good, if not better. So it's actually slowed down the hiring urgency, and it's within the kind of, you know, recent memory. This is 2021, where hiring managers were rushing offers out. Do you remember only a couple of years ago, it was like we were forcing hiring managers to do one interview and then offer immediately. It was like it was ridiculously fast, and it's crazy how fast it's just sort of flipped the market. So yeah, Liz, I totally agree. I think like there's another question, like how do we increase the urgency then? I mean, is there any theories on this? We don't want to artificially create constraint. We don't want to artificially create scarcity and, you know, be dishonest with hiring managers. But how do we actually tell the hiring managers, look, you can't just sit on it and wait for the next person. If you see the right candidate, or you see a candidate is capable and above the bar and fits in, you know, ticks the boxes, got to go for it. Otherwise, that person is left. Any sort of techniques or theories you want to use? Charles, I'm going to lean on you because you're an ex-recruiter. You must have had that experience before. Any quick tips that might re-inject urgency to a hiring manager that's feeling a little bit more too relaxed about the labor market?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, the question you have there, Hung, because I was chatting with two recruiting leaders just last week around the urgency factor. And one of those is recruiters need more time to partner with their customers, right? With their hiring managers. I think there's too much of, if you think about the whole theme here, is you have one post, you have 1,000 applicants. That I literally mean 1,000 applicants in these two cases. And they said the recruiters are spending so much time not only trying to go through all that and then try to kind of cater to the candidates in a timely way, but also to Arian's point, the higher quality piece, but then also to the point of how do you find the time to sit down with the hiring manager to really talk about the urgency and the impact of the business. So if I think about the talent acquisition partner, and I like to reference that as a recruiter, today is very different. It was 3.5 years ago, as I mentioned. 3.5 years ago, you talk about your hiring plan, you talk about the criteria, what is the competencies you're looking for, think about the impact of the business. There was a partnership. I think today, because look, to be frank, in the recruiting industry, it's been hit hard in the last year. I mean, we all feel for the whole industry. I certainly do. That now suddenly the recruiters trying to tackle 3, 4, 5 different things, and so to drive that urgency, it's a lot harder. That's number one. Number two, I think not only need more time, I think really taking a look at the whole process and equating it to what is the outcome you're looking for would be really important, right? So the hiring manager's mindset right now, it's a supply chain. I know one hiring leader I once worked with said, well, isn't it you just have X amount of applicants, X amount of shortlist, and then if I think this works, then great, I'll make a hire. If it doesn't, then let's go back to the start again. I think really setting an expectation of the process is going to be important, but when your process is thrown into, I'll call it a level of chaotic mix, it's really hard to set that expectation. So I think if we're looking at the TAP today, the hard part of their job is to really be able to spend that time setting the expectation, but also spending that time laying out a very clean process so that the hiring manager sees if I'm going to make a hire, I'm going to make a selection. It's because it was a clean, simple, understood methodology that leads me to the final step. I think right now it's just when Arian said, and I think I saw a couple comments here about looking for the next best one every single time. I'm guilty of it too because the way the market works today, it's like, hey Arian, we got another one, we got another one. And when that happens, it definitely leads to what's the next shiny object? What's the next, hey, this candidate looks a little better than the last one. Let's go and consider that one. And so we have to learn to set expectations. And look, I'll be vulnerable. I mean, it's same for me as a recruiter at heart. But today it's definitely been a much more fluid environment than it was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and it's probably something that is how we it's actually a good sort of it's a big enough topic to even have a separate show on, like how do you create urgency to drive things across the line, because to Aaron's point earlier, there is a genuine sort of a case as well. It's not just hiring managers. Abundance bias, a mindset can kind of be perceived as a negative description of the situation. But it is also the case. Is reality is companies do have the opportunity to up level their talent right now, and so it may it's not unfair for them to actually spend a bit more time to make sure that actually we're getting bar raisers in and not just people who fit in as good as the last person. You want to up level, so there is that genuine case as well. So lots to think about there. I don't think any easy solutions, but we can all agree more candidates, less recruiters, longer hiring process, more inefficient process, and that has resulted in basically a majority of TA leaders surveyed saying that they didn't hit their hiring goals in 2024. Okay, let's move on. Key hiring challenges in 2024. Why don't we, Arian? Why don't you talk us a little bit through this? What am I looking at in terms of the chart on the right hand side? The hiring challenges experienced last 12 months. So this is basically we've surveyed the heads of TA and they've ranked sort of what these challenges might be. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. I think what we are seeing is, so we when we survey, we ask them what are the challenges that you are facing, and that changes year over year, which is very, very interesting. And since last few years, there have been a lot of kind of pendulum swing. We've seen this list changing quite dramatically from one year to another. In 2024, retaining top talent, lack of qualified candidates, unmanageable workload for the recruiting team topped So those were the three things that really topped this list, which is actually probably not surprising. One thing that probably surprising to the audience is retaining top talent. With the abundance of talent out there, that, you know, one could argue that that may not be the case, but still, leaders care a lot about retaining the top talent. I think some of it probably is because there's another slide on this, but there have been a lot of layoffs. Uh, Even though it was a smaller layoff, but it seems like kind of across the board, across the multiple, across the sectors, we've seen a lot more activities of these small little layoffs happening across a larger portion of the industry. So I think still the top talent who can really command the top dollar, can go anywhere, is really thinking about where can I go to gain that stability, where can I go to shine again. So retaining the top talent is the most important thing for the people that were surveyed. And also the next two are probably fairly obvious, but really interesting result in 2024.
Very, very good. Thank you, Arian. I'm interested to know about the stat that we've picked out here. 43% of organizations report interview scheduling as their top bottleneck. Firstly, why have they said that? Like, do we get any data from this? Sort of any commentary as to what the issue was? And yeah, I mean, let's start with that as a base point to talk about. Charles, you got any comments to make on this?
Yeah, this one is an interesting one because I would say from my own related experience in recruiting is, I don't know how many people here would agree. I find it's really hard to do the back and forth with candidates or anyone for that matter to schedule. I mean, what's your best days and times? Huh? That's the favorite, old manual approach to finding availability. And I think for me, I think that is one of the big causes, is that's why it's a bottleneck, right? Like once you do more than two kind of back and forths, it stalls. And so I think one of the key bottleneck areas candidates or not candidates, but recruiting teams are finding today more than ever is that essentially once you do 1 to 2 handoffs, it doesn't kind of come together. Think about now even more candidates, as we just talked earlier, how that completely backs things up. So that's one key thing that I've caught from some of our key kind of hiring customers and also folks in the industry. The second one, I think the key thing to note here about bottlenecks is just simply capacity to interview, right? So you think about, not only is it hard to do handover points, and then it's like, all right, kind of starts to fizzle, call it the process there. It's finding the time available in people's calendars. So not only is it the email exchange, it's like, Nelson, I'm looking at your calendar, Hung, you're the hiring manager. You only have so much time in a given day. So now suddenly I'm spending time trying to figure out where your availability is. And if you're not available, then do I have a backup I can find for you? And then now I've got to get it back to the candidate. Find the candidate's best available days don't match up to what your available days are or your backup's available days. Think about that. And now you times it by 300 candidates, particularly if you're in a higher volume environment where it's not just about the top 10, you're now trying to put 50 people through. So yeah, I think that's one of those two things are key areas, at least I saw within the bottleneck piece of this 43% for scheduling.
Yeah, I would imagine as well that sort of, I wonder whether we're also interviewing more candidates as well. So not only are we getting more applicants, but the interviews per hire ratio, I think, has increased because, again, hiring managers may want to see more people. So, okay, that actually increases the interview scheduling load because you got a bunch more people you got to pipeline in. So that probably, I just wonder whether we may have always been at like peak capacity, but then suddenly with this sort of applicant surge we've experienced last 18 months or so, plus this need for to hire for bar raises, be more careful in the types of people we're actually making offers to, has increased the numbers of interviews per hire, and that obviously means lots more scheduling required. The scheduling overheads increase massively as a result of it. Yeah, very, very interesting. Arian, I remember having a conversation with you maybe a year or so ago, actually, where there was some basic innovations that could take place that essentially companies weren't doing, but with use of tooling, sometimes you can force the issue and make it easier for them to do, like locking out particular interview days or so, or creating space within the calendar, almost in advance of candidates entering the pipeline. You already agree with the hiring managers, look, we need like 2 hours on a Friday, every Friday, for you to do these interviews. Otherwise, you're not going to be part of this party. And stuff like that can really help, because it means that you're not just chasing around trying to, essentially hit a moving target, because obviously everyone's diary shifts all the time. I wonder whether sort of is that a manual process, Arian, or is that something we can do within GoodTime now? Or like, how does it work?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you can absolutely automate that. And definitely scheduling becomes a huge bottleneck. It's a time suck also for the TA team. You end up spending so much of your day just scheduling interviews to where you actually don't even get to have time to talk to candidates. But using scheduling capabilities like, GoodTime, you can actually set up, hey, you probably need to have that kind of agreement with the hiring managers that, hey, I need you to interview at least 5 times a week, maximum of 2 times a day. We will load balance you so that you're not, interviewing all day, every single day, but we need you to commit to it. Or, hey, on Friday, 4 hours, block out 4 hours, have a particular title, which the scheduling capability can actually read as available time for the particular hiring manager. And that time is reserved for interviews. Give me that time. And with that kind of commitment, you can actually work through these larger candidate pipeline much quicker and faster. And also it benefits the hiring manager. So if you can automate all that, it saves a ton of time and it creates the efficiency that you didn't have.
You know what? That's just the one instant efficiency all of us could implement. I'd be interested in the crowd right now. Let me know, folks. Like, have you organized with your hiring managers set times in the week for interviewing? Yes or no, folks? Let us know in the comments. Or are you kind of chasing around trying, per candidate, trying to slot folks in? I just wonder sort of where we're at with this, because this is a little bit of stakeholder management, a little bit of trying to sort of get transparency and process, but also trying to kind of really do the right thing for the hiring manager, even though you might get initial resistance. And a lot of people are very protective of their diaries and so on, but actually you got to take it away a little bit from them and say, look, we just need this time away from you. Otherwise, maybe you can't prioritize them as prioritize the service. You got to be tough there. Yeah, you got to push. You got to really push. Okay, let's move on. Thanks for letting us know what your thoughts are, folks. That might be another Brainfood Live in the future. Like, how do we get to the point where we can, what are the techniques to persuade hiring managers to commit specific times in the day or week to do the interview? Yeah, everyone's chasing around. I mean, that's crazy. So far, small sample, but it looks like that's probably still the default, right? It's quite unusual to get a structured interview situation there. Okay, this one is quite interesting because we all talk about the labor market, the job market, etc. But of course, there's no single market. It's all different segments, it's different regions and what have you. And this is quite interesting for hiring performance by sector. Talk us through this. It looks like there's certain sectors that have actually done better in terms of achieving hiring goals, but some of them have done worse. What are our observations on this? Like, can we understand, why do we feel, whether what's happened in healthcare recruiting, should I say, that's caused them to say, actually, we've hit our targets, whereas more or less everyone else has said, no, we haven't. Any theories as to this? Charles, you want to go? Sorry, I shouldn't nominate yet.
Yeah, no, sounds great. I think for this particular area, what's really interesting for me is that healthcare, to your point, rebounded. I think there's 56% of the goals that were met there. I think is that, one of the things I look at as one of the traditional I mean, if you think about traditional hiring in kind of corporate only hiring, there is more focused on high volume. And I think if you think about the high volume aspects, is that also, I think, attracts a broader set of skills and talents to the table. So if you think about, manufacturing, you think about even financial services and technology, some of the other areas where it's a little bit more broader set, I've noticed that there's more candidates that are applying typically that are very broad and wide. So if you think about manufacturing as one example, it's they're trying to become more skill specific, but they don't want to stop the applicant flow. So if you think about that, there is a lot of movement that's happening where you have to sift through all those candidates that are applying, whether you do a ZipRecruiter, Indeed post or whatnot, and try and make sense of it. And that means you're going to have to interview more, you're going to have to move quicker, but at the same time, it doesn't make attainment any easier because your recruiting teams are also running really lean. I think for healthcare, where I'm seeing the improvement, and we've actually been engaging with quite a number of healthcare leaders out there, is that one thing that they have done really well is that they've really been honing into specific skill sets that they need. Now, the certifications don't change for healthcare. So if you're applying for a clinician job or or applying for a specialist role, that will actually help them to, they've been honing in more on specific candidate traits so that they've been able to narrow their funnel. But I think also healthcare has been much more clear in terms of identifying what they're looking for. I think if you look at some of the manufacturing postings, some of the retail job postings, it's very broad. And so if you think about the whole part of our conversation from start to finish, is that you're also seeing a lot more candidates applying, you're seeing a lot more activity going, but it doesn't mean it's easier to attain. And I think this is where kind of working through all those pieces in the process and bring some level of standardization is going to be important.
Charles, that's a really interesting observation, man. I mean, essentially, we're talking about the overwhelming deluge of candidates, and generally speaking, yeah, maybe every sector has increased a tick up there, but maybe certain sectors have attracted more than the average. And you can imagine like the high certification functions where you need to have gone through some training, you need to have sort of the right certifications to even be in play. They may not have received that degree of volume. I would imagine healthcare being one of the most typical. So very, very interesting. So maybe they have a less of an issue with the overwhelming numbers of applicants there, whereas everyone else, of course, just being hammered that way. Interesting on the high volume side. Again, Arian, I'm reminded of some of the conversations we had maybe 12 months or so ago. We talked about like graduate entry type, sort of very high volume. How do you do that? And it was, one of the techniques was actually to centralize it to a certain point, wasn't it? To do, like assessment days, rather than, if you are going to hire 500 people, does it make sense to do traditional pipelines for that? Or do you want to actually do it en masse and have it centralized into a single sort of event? And I think you guys have got some experience of seeing companies being successful that way, haven't you, Arian?
Yeah, definitely. Hiring days, it's a pretty effective tool that I think a lot of our high volume customers end up using. Instead of candidates kind of trickling in, you do a hiring day where you invite a very large number of candidates, and then you compare them over like 2 to 3 days, and you get to the hires much quicker, much faster. You don't get biased from, there's definitely bias of like when you see some candidates last week versus this week and so on. So it's like within a very compact time period, you can see a lot of candidates at the same time. And actually, I wanted to comment one thing, Hung, if you don't mind me adding some context to this chart. So manufacturing is definitely a high volume sector, and I think that's also pretty notable that there's a huge drop there. Healthcare is definitely doing better, but manufacturing, there's a really big drop. Something that we've been thinking about as we're working a lot with high volume customers, and we're providing assessment capabilities and so on to high volume customers. One thing that we actually mentioned to our customers is that with high volume, I think a lot of times we just think of speed to hire being really important. So how can we actually get the candidates in faster, fill the seats really quickly? But I wonder the reason why there's a huge drop is because maybe there's too much focus on speed to hire only, which means a lot of our customers mentioned that, hey, my churn rate goes up just through the roof if I hire too fast. And then now you have to backfill. So your hiring goal just continues to go up because you're just filling the seats and they leave in 3 months. And now you have more and more and more to fill. One thing that we do kind of mention to our customers, especially in high volume, is speed. How do we balance speed to hire with the quality of hire also? So that you are hiring quality people that will stay with you, that will do good work over multiple years instead of 3 months and then they leave.
Yeah, really good point. Really good point. I mean, pushing people, getting just the bums on seats attitude, that's just going to create more work down the pipeline, because your churn rate's too high, and you have to refill those jobs. And not only this, but you also end up demoralizing your recruiters. I feel, if you in a situation where you have to constantly re-recruit for those roles, the kind of performance level of the team is going to go down simply because the morale will be under siege. So yeah, you got to be really careful with a lot of this stuff. But very interesting. Final point on this: no industry surpassed 60% attainment for the third consecutive year. So I wonder whether some of this maybe just be heads of TA overestimating, being extremely bad at forecasting what their goals might be. But yeah, it's worthy. It's worth noting, at least, to say that actually we're consistently undershooting what we say our goals will be. That's obviously something we need to look at. Either we get better at our jobs, or we have a better way to think about our capabilities here. Okay, moving on. What have we got here? Deeper look at enterprise. So here's where we're looking at some of the larger scale companies. How actually do we define enterprise? You mentioned high volume hiring a couple of times, Arian. Do you guys have an internal sort of perspective of what how you classify an enterprise customer? Or what is that? What's the hiring volume that need to be for it to be described that way?
So every company defines enterprise slightly differently, I'm sure, but within GoodTime, we define it as 1,500 employees and above as enterprise.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Sorry, Charles, was someone said? No, sorry, I think it's just some feedback coming into my speakers there. No worries. Okay. In terms of the, so are there any particular differences of recruiting challenges when you get to that type of size? I mean, Charles, let's bring you in on this, because you have worked for companies of that type of size and scale, but you've also worked for much smaller businesses as well. How would you kind of what are the challenges that are unique to companies that have got to a certain scale and complexity of organization?
Yeah, I think for larger companies, I look at smaller companies, the differences are there, but sometimes it's just more magnified. So if I think about for enterprises, it's the process complexity, it's a need for efficiency through that. So some teams I've had before where you have various different processes between sales recruiting, you got tech recruiting, you have headquarters versus decentralized, your organizational structure. So I think that's what one big aspect of it is. The other part is kind of on the last slide there about meeting hiring goals, which I'll put a plug. I think I was able to meet hiring goals for quite a few years because you try to put a planning process in place. You mentioned about finance or your own goals. So there is an additional kind of like where I was in smaller environments was just hire as aggressively as you can. And then there's in the large enterprise is working closer with finance to really build your capacity to your process to your output. So I think that's a unique piece strictly to enterprise I've seen more of than on the smaller business side. But nonetheless, one thing I have found is when you magnify it by 2, 3, 4x, it becomes pretty overwhelming. So for the enterprise, I find it's those complexities that become that much bigger because of the size and the regions and the different business units and such that come in play.
Yeah, really, really a fair point. Let's have a look at some of the highlights that we've picked out on this slide here. 50% of enterprise teams claim growing candidate demands require more touch points in the hiring process. So I'm reading this to say actually candidates are suggesting they need to have more information, more concierge experience, more, I guess, more transparent, basically a better experience going through the flow. Is there any particular reason why candidates going forward in an enterprise process would require this, aside from a smaller company? Any thoughts on that? Any either one of you guys be interested in your view on it?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting to see that result. I think candidates probably just expect better, more standardized, more white glove services from the logos that they recognize. That are brands that they use, brands that they admire. They applied for the job. They want that same consumer experience from those brands, so they want to be notified more quickly. They want to, they want to see the use of, they want the process to feel a lot more efficient and productive, and they can, go through the process much quicker and so on. I feel like that's probably contributing to that. And also, I think nowadays with candidates using AI also on their side, applying for a lot of different jobs at the branch that they admire, I'm sure their demand is that they want to hear back quicker. They want the experience to be better also, so they can go through their process quicker also.
That's a really
I would
interesting
add
theory.
one.
Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, I would add one thing to Arian's point there is because she mentioned technology. I think technology has helped and also maybe worked against to increase this as well. And we will probably touch on the right technology. Is I know quite a few candidates in the tech space because, of course, the tech space had quite a few layoffs in the last year and a half. And almost all of them have said, you know what, Charles, I've never experienced where you apply for a job and the first response is you get some automated thing that tells you you're not qualified. And they said, Charles, I've done marketing, I've done all this. Is it maybe the years? So then suddenly candidates are now being much more picky because they feel that if you give them like an automated service, and I say automated in a very careful way because we're in automation as well, but I think candidates have experienced this machine learning type of rules based automation where they're all being cut out of the process. So now when they're in a hiring process, if they do get in, they're becoming much more picky around, I need more touch points. I need to be proven that I'm actually needed, wanted, where are my needs being met in the process. And so that generative piece that we're seeing in the industry right now is now becoming a bigger play because candidates are becoming much more, I would say, picky and also, I would say, selective is probably the better word based on what's happened in the last year. Because I know one person who I've known for years in recruiting. He said, "This is the first time, Charles, I'm not getting any responses. But when I got that one response, I was testing to see, like, will this be my long-term place? Because am I just simply made it through because of one reason or another in their algorithm? Or is it because I'm really being treated like a candidate?" And back to Arian's point about being customers, that person who uses a lot of, I would say, tech and agency services when they were in recruitment said that I'm not sure if I'm going to use these other ones again because I actually worked a lot with them. And when they told me to apply, nothing happened afterwards. So I think this is something that's going to be a crux of discussion for the next, I'd say, up to 24 or 36 months because candidates are going to want more touch points because of how tech has also been treating candidates as well.
Yeah, really interesting theories on this. Another Brainfood Live topic to discuss. I'd love to sit on this topic a little bit more, but we've got to fly through. Let's move on to the next slide here. Top TA teams double down on tech. I think this is broadly true, isn't it? I don't see any sort of TA team decided to withdraw from technology. I don't think that makes any sense at all. We've kind of unlocked the door over the last couple of years with regards to the innovations that we can sort of achieve with artificial intelligence, and we have to embrace it. But it looks like we've got some evidence that that's the case. Talk us through this chart on the right-hand side, Arian. It looks like here, let's have a look at this. I noticed the asterisk is worth picking out here. So the organizations that basically said that they were 75% or more towards hiring goals. So these are the organizations that said, you know what, we're close to hitting these goals. There seems to be some correlation there with where they are adopting technology. Am I reading that chart correctly, Arun?
Yeah, definitely. So the ones that overperformed compared to their peers in 2024, those are the trends on the right hand side that they have displayed. So upgrading, hiring technology, which is a must have at this point. Your TA team is much smaller. You're all being asked to do a lot more with less. One of our customers, their TA team went from 30 people to 2 people, but their hiring goal is surprisingly not very different from what they were a couple years back. So now, how do we have 2 people do the work of 30 people? Like, you can't do that without technology. So upgrading hiring technology is a key. And also, before when, SaaS was a big deal, SaaS is still a big deal, but when SaaS kind of came into existence, there was definitely a bell curve of early adopters and then the, majority in the middle and then the laggards. I feel like nowadays, every TA team needs to be early adopters, really need to test
Yeah.
out the technology early, um, and really understand the capability and see what works for them. So I think we don't have any luxury of becoming a laggard and see,
Mm.
what other people are doing. And then, 5 or 10 years later, I will adapt to whatever surface is to the top. I don't think we have that type of time at this time. So I think that's why companies that are willing to upgrade the hiring technology have overperformed. And then efficiencies, I think these are all kind of similar patterns. Now,
Mm.
without efficiency, boosting efficiency, how do we have 2 people do the work of 30 people? And then also utilizing AI. AI is a must. AI is here to stay. So how do we harness that power early so that I can incorporate that into my practice and do better than my peers?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think this absolutely makes sense. It's not something that we need to overly scrutinize. I think it's again, we don't want to get into the world of technology is the only be all and end all. That's not what we're saying. But what we are saying is if the tools have presented themselves and they manifestly improve your performance, then you've got to pick it up. You can't not sort of do it. So we're really beyond it at this point. Okay, let's move it on to the next slide. I think it's related to this. Efficiency and AI in focus for 2025. So this is what, we're asking these questions late last year and projecting further forward what their priorities were. What are we looking at here, Charles? For which tasks does your hiring team utilize automation or AI? This is really interesting. What surprised you about these results, and what did you feel was actually, yeah, I thought that would be the case?
Yeah, I think for me, the analytics and reporting piece definitely I've seen in the industry a lot because people want to have better reporting, real on-time reporting. But the part for me that is really interesting as well as see the 42, 42, 42 is that you see the elements of AI recruiters, chatbots, interview scheduling, application resume review and screening. Those three areas are very much integrated, but also should be decoupled at the same time if you think about what's going on there. Because for me, the priority really comes back to it's clear that there's an efficiency need, but it's also going to be clear about understanding the aspects of each of those line items of the type of technology that you need to drive the efficiency you want and need as well. So if I think about it this way, you could apply machine-based learning on things like applications and reviews and screenings. You're talking about criterias and keywords and all that kind of stuff we see a lot in tech today. I think that space you're going to see a need for more agentic capabilities. When I say agentic, it's really more generative AI. It means being able to think like a human. It's going to be hard to do, but I think it's an evolving piece. The biggest low-hanging fruit there, I think, is interview scheduling. But it's going to be a real fine point of really understand what's behind it, right? And so scheduling is not a Hung, are you available these 5 times? We just talked it throughout this whole call. It's understanding all the elements of what could happen in the process. And that AI driven automation piece is going to be big, I think, in the interview scheduling aspect of it. Put my bias aside on that. Is that how do you ensure that when a schedule is being created, it's not only more efficient, it's more human because it's not the candidate working for you, it's how you can work for the candidate. If you can accomplish that, I'll call it impression with a candidate and yet be efficient, you won half the battle. I mean, that's the difference between you versus another company that could be using two different types of tech. And for us, and I personally think, really close, because, this excites me on this particular one, is I think AI is going to be a critical piece, but we're seeing so many different forms of AI. So it's not surprising for me to see 42, 42, 42, and then 46. But I think the agentic piece is going to be the big question any TA leader here should be asking is, how ready is that company to have generative data ready capabilities for the future?
Yeah, really good point. And you mentioned low hanging fruit, but that I think that's absolutely the case as well. Like TA teams, you got to go for the stuff that's doable and makes the highest impact for lowest kind of cognitive effort on your side. We can spend a lot of time in abstraction and trying to think what the long term plan is, but if your recruiters, your hiring managers are wrestling around doing manual stuff where we've seen clear evidence that we can use technology to really alleviate those problems, then we just got to pick those fruit. They're right there. Question for you, Aryan. Where do you think TA teams should focus if they could choose one thing to use AI in? Like, where do you think within that list that we're looking at here, where do you think is going to be the investment in 2025 for the survey group that we got into play?
And I'm probably I'm biased, but definitely I'm gonna pick interview scheduling. But if you let me pick two, I would say interview scheduling and screening. So interview scheduling, because the reason why I picked those two, bias aside, is just how much time can we save for our TA. We're all being like that. Really, I think that the reality that we are in is that the team size is much smaller. So how do we actually give time back to our team? So interview scheduling can take up to 40-50% of your days if you are, if you actually are full cycle recruiters, or if you are recruiting coordinators, maybe even more so. So how do we, if we can, and also it's a very low hanging fruit. The ROI is very, very clear, and also ROI on the candidate side and candidate sentiment about the process is pretty clear and very high ROI. So I would say interview scheduling is a very low hanging fruit type of work that you can do to free up as much as 40% of your team's time. And then I pick screening. It's because we just get too many applicants at the same time. Within a few days, you get thousands. So and you may not be able to do justice to all those amazing talent out there. If you get to the first 100, and then you get so fatigued to go through all these resumes, so you definitely need technology to help you with that. So I would pick those two.
Yeah, really good points. And to be honest with you, it's probably now again there's no way you can do it manually. It's simply because of the volume surging through. We need this innovation in there. But it just occurred to me, by the way, the interview scheduling stuff. It's a win-win-win for everybody in the process. There's another thing you need to think about, like where is the wins distributed? It's not just the recruiter benefiting from having more time back to do other stuff. It's like, you know what, the candidate is able to relieve the ambiguity of trying to figure out when or where he or she is able to get into an interview. The hiring manager doesn't have a lot of ambiguity either, in the sense that straight away the slot has been sort of isolated. The hiring manager knows that there's not going to be a case where they're overloaded or double booked or anything like that. These problems disappear from the entire experience. So you get all the stakeholders basically up level their experience with that implementation. Okay, let's move forward. I think this is the final slide, really, folks. Let's have a look at this. Quite an interesting distribution as to where different sectors actually had focuses. So in other words, what were they going to do? Charles, go with you here. Sort of overall, everyone's saying, we're going to adopt AI, but we've got a different sort of way in which different priority list according to different sectors. Can you give us your assessment as to why that is the case, where retailers saying we're going to upgrade and hiring technology, whereas healthcare, manufacturing, and technology itself is saying, well, actually, we need to be upgrading on efficiency, and technology, I beg your pardon, is upgrading on hiring technology. So there's differences between the sectors. What's your quick theory?
I think there's difference in the sectors, but one thing I'll just put a quick quip here is I think there's some commonality across all of them, right? They're all looking at some level of improving efficiency and experience. It's just they're in different stages, probably in their evolution. So if I look at retail, they're in this big push across all their tech stacks, from POS, point of sale, all the way to hiring, is really to adopt more generative AI capabilities because of the retail experience to candidates as they could be customers. I think the other two, if you look at healthcare and manufacturing, they have been investing in bits and pieces, but efficiency is going to be a key because they're running super lean at the same time. So it's a little piece of, I'd say, similarities, but just where are they focusing first? I think manufacturing's always been a process-driven environment. I think for technology, kind of like retail, it is, let's dive deep into the generative world. And of course, if you look at financial services, I found it's interesting that this AI piece come in play, because I did talk with one of our clients recently, which is a big financial institution, is really looking at taking the deep dive first and then engineering back into the processes that can line up with AI. It's industry practices, right? It's all nuances of each industry that I would say is not right or wrong. It's just different approaches, but all of them are definitely looking at, number one, process efficiency, and number two, using Gen AI based capabilities to support that.
Yeah, really good point. I think financial services as well, given the fact it's just generally all digital stuff anyway, I think that they're kind of almost culturally inclined to be very early adopters with AI. Okay, we are at the end of the quick overview of the report, folks. I hope you've had some value from this discussion. Of course, there's lots more to talk about, but I want to flash up this slide for you again, so you can download the report and digest it in full yourself. There should be a QR code up on the screen. It's the same QR code that flashed up earlier. So if you didn't capture it, go ahead and grab it now. Just take a phone out and snap away. This is particularly for the people who are watching this on LinkedIn, because we weren't able to email you this report. So this is your chance to get a hold of it. Okay, final question for Arun and Charles before I let you go. Can you give us like one tip that you would give to a TA person who's watched this and thought, okay, great, I know I need to get more efficient. What's the one thing you would sort of advise them to do, a doable thing that should be their number one priority?
Yeah, in the slide before, 93% of TA leaders are thinking about upgrading their technology and bringing in technology, which is just staggering number. Like I mentioned, I think we don't have luxury to be a laggard. Everyone needs to be an early adopter, and I think everyone is exactly doing that. My advice is to really educate. Let's educate ourselves about technology, AI. How do we harness the power? And a small thing that you can do is to involve your vendors. Maybe do a lunch and learn session. Ask your vendors to come in and educate your team on how they are using AI, what the technology landscape looks like, and so on. I think that education is really key. And not only key to just educate yourself and learn about the technology and have the knowledge, but really kind of have a seat at the table when it comes to AI talk within the company. In order for TA team to show up and really educated and have a seat at the table when it comes to AI adoption, I think education will be really important, and I think involving vendors would be a kind of quick way to get that education.
Yeah, I think absolutely right. Charles, your view on this?
Yeah, my final thought would be kind of feeding on Aryan's point is educating really around the differences of the AI technologies out there. The word AI is really used a lot, in some ways overused in the market. For me, it's more about how can that technology, for you to think about, impacts not only efficiency for your recruiters, we talk a lot about efficiency, but translates into a very human as possible experience for candidates. And that's why I've been pushing this whole thought around machine learning based technologies versus generative based technologies. And those are kind of questions you want to ask: is how ready is your technology, regardless whether it's us or anyone else? Are you able to adopt and adapt at quick generative type, I would say, motions where it's not fixed? Because once fixed, candidates can break the system. When you're flexible and when you're really much more of that generative capability, it can move and flex with candidates. And so those are questions you want to ask vendors to think about as well.
Yeah, and this is something that we, again, a topic for another show. Like, how do we up level the AI literacy amongst the TA and HR world? I think that's probably something that people will find welcome. But folks, we are out of time. We're actually over time, so let me not sort of take any more of your time. And thank you so much, Charles Ma, for joining us, Arya Moon for joining us, and thank you very much for GoodTime for putting the investment in to produce this report. Very interesting for everyone. I'll keep this on screen, and again, we'll whip this around to people who've registered, so you've got sort of access to it. Okay, that's about it. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll keep rolling these sort of shows around. Brainfood Live keeps rolling all forward. But don't forget, GoodTime also did a webinar series late last year. Maybe we'll see some return of those as well. So make sure you follow GoodTime's company page on LinkedIn. That's probably where you're going to get some information as to when and if and when that's going to happen. So thanks for watching, everybody. We'll let you go. Have a good weekend if this is the end of your day. Have a good day if it's the start of your day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.